Have you ever met the connector? Well, he ponders, he helps, he creates, he writes, he speaks. He basically connects people and brings them together. I speak about Paul Solano of PS and All Marketing Group. At psandallmarketinggroup.com, you will receive an assembled group of Paul's contacts and connections that cross into many sectors of life. Please contact Paul Solano at 617-240-4130 or psandallmarketinggroup@gmail.com if you are in the market for a wide array of services. Again, please contact the connector, Paul Solano, at 617-240-4130 or psandallmarketinggroup@gmail.com with any questions. And now, here's Paul Solano, the host of PaulPonders.
Welcome to PaulPonders. My name is Paul Solano of PS and All Marketing Group, and I may be reached via email at paul@paulponders.com. Thank you for joining me for my foray into podcasting. It is great to be collaborating with my friend and associate Chalonzo Amos of PodPro Entertainment to bring you some fun, exciting, and informative podcasts. For many years, I've been referred to as the connector, or in Greater Boston circles as the connector. With psandallmarketinggroup.com, I've created a side gig to connect you and get things done. Please sit back and relax and listen to today's podcast. If you are driving or operating heavy machinery and just listening, then please just listen and stay focused on your task at hand. Thanks again for listening. Enjoy my ponderings. Let #PaulPonders begin.
Greetings, everyone. How is everyone doing? It's #PaulPonders for yet another podcast. It's really amazing. I am just blown away. I know I say it every time, but I truly, truly mean it, that I am absolutely blown away with the number of people who are stopping me in the streets, they're stopping me in traffic, stopping me at the local market, at the restaurant at Pearl Street Station. They're saying, Paul, you're doing a fabulous job. You have some really exciting guests, some really intriguing guests. Thank you for those kind words. I want to thank you for rating, for subscribing, reviewing, spreading the word, spreading the magic of #PaulPonders, PS and All Marketing Group. This would not have been possible if it wasn't for the one and only Techie Chalonzo in the control room, being the man behind the curtains, the man who is making these podcasts sound so great. Today we have another great podcast. I'm going to introduce you to one of the craftiest people I know, and his name is Bill Hall. I've known Bill for quite a few years, associate in the restaurant industry. I want to welcome Bill Hall. Bill, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. I feel very, very welcomed. I'm glad to be on the podcast.
Great to have you here. It's really, really exciting. Bill, you and I met when you were working with one of our beer vendors and all, but as I said at the top, you're one of the craftiest people I know. So I want you to tell our listeners, our many growing list of listeners, what exactly does Bill Hall do? What does Guided by Bill do?
Okay, so you said craftiest. Unfortunately, I don't know how to sew a stitch, but I'm definitely the craft beeriest person you might know.
I love it.
So Bill Hall, Guided by Bill. Right now, I am the CEO and head of sales for a company called Guided by Sales and Distribution. And it's basically a company I founded just about a year ago after kind of getting tired of the hiring and firing schedule that most sales reps in the craft beer industry deal with. I've been in the craft industry in and around some way or another for about 15 years now. But for about 3.5 years, obviously COVID had something to do with it, I found myself working for amazing companies and having them go bankrupt and basically losing my job through no fault of my own. And I started to realize that there was a bit of a tumultuous environment happening in the craft beer world, and I wanted to do something to help smaller breweries. So to shorten it up, I basically work with awesome local craft breweries that may not necessarily be able to afford a year-round salaried sales rep, but make amazing product and deserve representation in the market. So I help with them as sales, tastings, festival work, occasionally shipping the product to stores myself. And I work with breweries that are either self-distributing, little guys, or they do work with a distributor, like Idle Hands Craft Ales, just down the street from your restaurant. Amazing, amazing company. Every now and then, they just need a little bit of help, getting stuff out to the stores and someone to shake hands with buyers in the market.
Oh, that's true. And just a shout out to Chris and Grace over at Idle Hands. We find them really great to work with. We have one of their products on one of their IPAs foreseen as a permanent item on the tap. So I mentioned the word IPA. So one of the questions that I have for you is, you hear all these acronyms, you hear products, you hear styles and all, but if you want to maybe go from the least, I guess we have to go into so many things, right? ABV, styles and all. If you want to take it away and educate our listeners and myself too, because I'm still learning this wonderful craft beer market, this microbrew market. We'll use Four Seam as an example. What is that?
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a wildly open-ended question because I could go in any different direction there. But Four Seam specifically from Idle Hands is, so it's their flagship New England style IPA. Traditionally, New England style IPAs or East Coast IPAs or, Vermont IPAs, whatever people want to dub them, tend to be more hazy, juicy. You're using the citrusy oils from the hops to really highlight aroma and fruit flavors, less of the bitterness and intense flavor you might get from, say, like a West Coast IPA. You definitely are going to get like candied lime peel, a little bit of like orange pop in there. The nice thing I think about Idle Hands' Four Seam is it is lightly more filtered than some of what I call the hop chowder IPAs, which are unconditioned and really just like, it's like chewing through a glass. Theirs is still super refreshing and bright. We mentioned they are on tap as like a permanent feature. I do believe your restaurant also has another awesome local brewery, Bone Up Brewing, at the moment on draft. One of my other clients, super local, just around the way in Everett. I'd be remiss not to mention them.
Right, exactly. We have on tap right now, I believe it's called Extra Naked.
Yes, Extra Naked is a Belgian-style table beer. Table beers are basically just what the monks would have drank breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's a fresh, lower ABV, easy drinking style of beer with a Belgian yeast. So it's got a little bit of a fun, funky pop on the end, but nothing crazy challenging. It is a perfect beer for a day like today where I was sweating nonstop. Definitely very refreshing and fun.
All right, so that's Belgian. Okay, you've talked about IPAs, but what other styles is it possible? And I could have you on for many, many, many shows because this market is really just so intriguing. But what is the range from left to right, if you will, on the styles?
So there are just thousands of different styles in reality, but you've got your basic, your hoppy style beers, especially the most popular ones in America, West Coast IPAs, East Coast IPAs, whether they're bitter and piney or they're hazy and juicy. We have a style I call the Mid-Coast IPA, or the American IPA. It's a nice balance between both of those where you get your citrusy and your fruity and a little bit of hoppy, bitter backbone, kind of my favorite. And then, there's a whole realm of different dark beers, porters and stouts and bocks and Balkan porters and Russian imperial stouts and, you name it. The nice thing about the American craft beer market is we never really had any issues with dictation on what we can and can't use in beer. So really the wildly creative, fun, funky styles that are now being adopted all over the world have come from the American craft beer market. A lot of people don't even realize that like pumpkin beer, which is everybody's favorite college and dad beer come fall time, was actually invented right here in the Mass Bay colonies for the, original pilgrims, the colonials, to have something to drink and not die. And so that was like one of the very first inventions of new craft beer happened to be in the Puritan days.
That is fascinating. That really is. So when we look at the gamut of all the terms that you use, I heard you say piney, you use citrusy and all. I understand that there are hops involved with that.
Yes.
How many hops are there?
Oh, well, again, that's like, What's the saying? The limit does not exist. They're continuously creating new, wonderful, beautiful strains of hops all the time. You'll see on the side of a can of beer made with Citra and Mosaic, your flagships, and then BRU 173, or a brewery I work for out of Medfield, Seventh Wave, recently released a beer called Radiant Pink, named after one of the varietals of hops they used. An experimental hop hadn't actually even had a name yet. It was just nicknamed Pink, so they decided to call it, something to do with pink. There are new hops coming out I can't say every day, but pretty frequently with different styles of expression that work best blended with other special, unique experimental hops as well. We actually have a really amazing hop farm here in Massachusetts, 4 Star Farms out in Western Mass, that I was lucky enough a couple times to actually tour and go see the hops growing down in the vines and touch them actually in real life. So many people's experience with hops is, either in the can or they just get to touch little pellets. So it's really fun to actually see all the different hops growing and the way they smell in the wild. But yeah, to answer your question, sort of, there are, thousands and thousands of different styles of hops and hop expressions. I think when people talk about beer, they always go to 3 different predominant characteristics. They talk about the beer in the style of what the hop does to it. Again, piney and bitter or fruity and bright. They talk about what the malt does to it, the grains that use. So if you hear somebody say malty and smooth or sweet or deep or smoky, that all comes from the grain profile. Those tend to be more traditional European style beers and beers that you wouldn't really focus too much on the hops. And then you get to talk about yeast profiles. One of the things that we discovered last and the history of brewing kind, in human civilization, we didn't even know this was such an important thing, but yeast can give beer funky, weird, we call it farmhouse or horse blanket. With Belgian beers, a lot of times you'll get bubblegum, black pepper, and banana notes, depending on the temperature and time of fermentation. So there's just, so many different wonderful ways to categorize beer. I not to put down wine people or anything, but technically there are millions of more different combinations of flavor profiles that you can get from beer than you could for wine.
Interesting.
I'm going to get flack for that.
There we go. There we go. No, it's okay. I'm sure we will have some of our listeners whining about that.
I'll take the rebuttal. We'll chat it.
There we go. We'll see what's brewing here. And speaking of brewing, what about microbrewing? Okay. The whole process. Someone just doesn't wake up on a Saturday morning and say, oh, I think I'm going to put a beer together. I'm going to whip up a brew. How long is the process, Bill?
So the process, depending on what style of beer, generally takes about 2.5 weeks, or 4 to 5 weeks. We mentioned earlier how many different beers there are. Well, there's technically only 2 styles of beer, or brewing methods, I should say. There's ales and lagers. And ales are a style that are more predominant in America. I shouldn't say in the world, because in the world, I think more people brew lagers. But ales are a quicker brew. They ferment at a higher temperature, take generally about 2 weeks. And lagers, your big, bold German malty beers and your American macros are colder fermentation for a longer period of time. They generally take about 4 to 5 weeks. Now, there are obviously variants on that. Some people will ferment for much, much, much longer, or, you'll use a really funky Nordic, what they call a kvass yeast for ale fermentation that take 3 days, 4 days, and rapid fermentation. So it all depends, but generally, once you have your recipe and your equipment and all your stuff in place, 2 weeks to 4 to 5 weeks. The reality is most brewers spend years and years perfecting that one recipe that makes them say, hey, actually, you know what? I could open my own brewery. Hopefully they would have a lot more than just one really good beer, but you know what I'm saying.
The delivery of these wonderful microbrews come in either a keg, they come in a bottle, or a can. What is the process involved with something like that?
Depending on scale, it's a level of automation. Most of the breweries that I work with, have a nice small 3 to 6 to 8 head can filler. Nobody I'm working with really does bottles anymore. Bottles have kind of gone the way of the dodo, just because cans are so much more economically and ecologically friendly. They're lighter weight for shipping. They don't allow oxidization or light strike to hit the beer. So basically that means like, with your green bottle beers always have that fun little funky flavor. Heineken, they allow UV, ultraviolet light, to get into the bottle and actually kill some of the hop oils. And that's where you get that skunk flavor. Somebody says their can of beer got skunked. It's probably because they left it in a boiling trunk over the weekend, but that's not being skunked. But yeah, so the process generally, like I said, is automated. You have your cans on a big runner that get spun around and sprayed with sanitizer and water. They go underneath filler heads, which will inject the beer and CO2 into the can, and then whoosh, it'll get seamed off real quick. And depending on how fancy your setup is, it'll also run through and get labeled for you as well. I have the pleasure of occasionally hand labeling 20 to 30 cases at a time some days when I go to pitch in and help out. But yeah, most brewers are doing 30 cases to a pallet, which is just about 55 to 60 cases of each style at a time. And that can take, several hours to can through.
That's
depending on your system. Like I said, I work with so many different breweries across so many different sizes that like some people will do a pallet in 20 minutes and some people will take that hour and a half, 2 hours to do it.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, we've talked about so many different styles, so many different beers out there in the market. I'm sure our listeners are saying, wow, well, how do I know what is best? Is there some sort of encyclopedia, some sort of rating guide like there is with mutual funds, say like Morningstar? Is there some sort of rating guide out there, or are there several
so the reality is there aren't any official rating guides. It's not like in wine, I think Robert, whatever his name is, rates and reviews. There are apps. There's a bunch of different apps that people use. I think the most popular one at the moment is called Untapped. Personally, I don't like Untapped, and I think it has created a negative effect on the retail environment in the world. So many people rely on using this app to tell of other people saying what beer they like, to tell them what beer they would like, where a lot of times the ratings are artificially inflated, or reviews for breweries will tend to get artificially inflated when they, if a brewery releases a new beer every single week and it's a hype beer, people will get that beer rated a 5 and then never touch it ever again. Whereas a brewery will make a beer that's perfectly executed to the style and they release it all year long. The more people who get to review it, for some reason, those numbers go down, which causes the brewery's rating to go down, even though they're making some of the highest quality product in literally the world. The brewery that makes what I call hop chowder, a new can, same beer, different label every single week, their ratings tend to go up because of an artificial inflation. And so you see people at liquor stores, at bars, staring at their phone, looking at a list going, oh, that's less than 4 stars. Oh, that's less than 4 stars. When really, I think you should be asking your bartender, what does this taste like? What's this beer? You should be asking your beer buyer, if you have a reputable shop that brings in great craft beer, you should be going, hey, man, what's something fun or cooler? What do you recommend? What have you had recently that you really enjoyed? There are resources. Beer Advocate is one of the oldest websites and apps for beer rating and reviews, and I think it's a lot more impartial. Funnily enough, actually started here in Boston by two brothers many, many years ago. But yeah, it's a long-winded way of answering your question, saying, yes, there are, but you don't need to trust those.
Right. Exactly.
My best example, I will say, is one of my favorite styles of beer, the Kolsch. Absolutely love. It's a German Kolsch. Distraction Brewing Company out of Rosendale make an amazing one. Devil's Purse down in East Dennis. Probably one of the best American Kolsches I've ever tasted. Somebody left a review on Untapped that said, I don't really like Kolsches. This is one, period. This is one of the best executed beers of the Kolsch style my friends have ever had, period. 2 Kolschy for me, 1 star.
Wow.
So they admitted it's one of the best executions of that beer ever, but then still only gave it 1 star, which negatively impacts that beer. And then when a beer buyer at a store who's only relying on, these ratings don't buy the products, now that's bad for the brewery.
Right,
I
exactly.
could go on for hours about that. So we're gonna jump. We're gonna jump.
And I would be able to, we'll hop to it, I guess, right? One of, sorry about that.
No.
Got you
Did you
right
write
in the
these
middle.
down?
There we go. I'm the opening act, actually.
Hi, good warm up.
So anyway, thank you. The rating system, and I know that 1-star review, I know from being in the restaurant business, that 1-star review with a simple, horrible review that will say the French fries were cold, but the steak tips were awesome, a 1-star. And that actually stays on that rating. So for that brand, for that Kolsch, whether it's Devil's Tourist or the company from the brewery from Roslindale, unfortunately, that 1-star will stay out there, and that will impact what future sales will be, right?
Exactly. And, it's funny because in the craft beer world with sales reps and bar managers and retail shop owners who are kind of in the know and are starting to come around to how I feel about it, we make memes about it. We joke about it. There's been T-shirts that breweries have made to kind of like own it, like their 1-cap reviews. But 99.9% of the public doesn't see that. They don't know that. They don't understand what that 1-star actually means. They just see a number. And so I think it's important, to try to educate your customers as much as possible. And if you see somebody just staring at their phone and, Untapped or whatever rating draft pick it is, to engage with them. And, the best thing that could ever happen is you're going to get a free sample at a bar to try something, see if you like it or not, as opposed to trusting Joey K from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who had it one time 3 years ago.
Right. Exactly. So for our listeners in the audience, please take this wonderful advice that Bill Hall, Guided by Bill, is giving us, really, sincerely. That's, as I've said in the past, that's sincerely and seriously, and I really mean that. One of these days, I will have that as a word in the Merriam-Webster, sincerely. But
actually,
anyways, Bill, as we wind down, do you do guest speaking appearances to local organizations? Can people reach out to you and have you as a guest speaker?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. Anytime I get to talk, I shine.
Well, as I always say, I show up at the opening of an envelope, and I never met a microphone I do not like.
Yeah.
But, Bill, I want to thank you for being with us for this episode of #PaulPonders. How do people reach out to you? How do they contact you?
Well, for the distribution and sales side, it's as easy as shooting an email. I'm guidedbybill@gmail, at Hotmail, any system pings to me. Guided by Bill. Or if you want to see some of my fun beer adventures or pick my brain, Beers Over Boston on Instagram and Facebook. Again, that's Beers with an S Over Boston. That's my social media site. I actually do that with a partner. Me and her showcase all of our amazing craft beer adventures and products and breweries that we love and embrace. We do tons of raffles and giveaways. I think right now we're giving away a bunch of Red Sox tickets for a food event. We're giving away a wine fridge, a beer fridge. Yeah, Beers Over Boston is a great way to get a hold of us. And that'd probably be the best way to reach out about speaking engagements, special events, tastings at your companies, anything like that. I do.
That is super. And I'm learning something here in this podcast. I'm going to have to check out on Instagram, and we're going to have Beers Over Boston be a follower of #PaulPonders.
Yeah, it's funny. We follow each other on Facebook and have communicated before, but I completely forget to post on my personal stuff about all the fun business stuff I do. So yeah, we'll definitely follow you guys.
Absolutely. And don't forget to rate, subscribe, and review us at all times. So, Bill, I want to thank you for being our guest for this episode. We'll see you around town at a local brewery somewhere along the way, right?
Oh, yeah. There's a good chance if you take a peek at a liquor store, brewery, or craft beer bar, I'm running around either delivering cases or helping them deplete them.
And you do it so well. Guided by Bill. Thank you so much. So that concludes this episode. We'll catch everyone on the other end. #Indeed. I trust that you have enjoyed #PaulPonders. Again, my name is Paul Solano of PS&All Marketing Group, and I may be reached via email at paul@paulponders.com.
to do some more pondering. Many thanks to my longtime collaborative friend and associate, Chalonzo Amos of Pod Pro Entertainment, in bringing you our fun, exciting, informative podcasts. You rock, Techie Chalonzo. With P&S and All Marketing Group, I created a side gig to connect you and get things done. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me at paul@paulponders.com with any questions. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at PaulPonders. Follow us on Twitter at PaulPondersPod. Follow us on Instagram at PaulPondersPodcast. Thank you again for listening to #PaulPonders, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our website paulponders.com, or wherever you stream your podcasts. Subscribe, stream, rate, and review our shows. Your ratings and reviews help our show reach new audiences. Produced by Pod Pro Entertainment. #PaulPonders lives within a network of podcasts located at podproentertainment.com. #the new radio. Until we meet again, my friend, stay well. #Indeed.